Welcome back everyone. For today's video, we are back once again from the 70th Iowa State Open Championship here in Iowa City, Iowa. Now, we did a recap after my first round win, but there were still two more games to be played today, and we're going to cover those in this video, I should say. Now, obviously, I won in the first round. With 3 rounds, you never know what's going to happen, and we're going to pick it up in the second round where I'm playing with the black pieces against Matthew Kent Pikus. Now, fun fact, Matthew Kent Pikus is a player who actually played in the Louisiana State Championship. He is a player that I, in fact, prepared for, as I thought I might play him in the 6th round before ultimately playing Nicholas Matta, the top-ranked local player. But I did do a little preparation specifically for Matthew Pikus, thinking I might have the black pieces. As such, it was a nice welcome when I played him in the second round with the black pieces, because without a lot of time to prepare, ordinarily I wasn't sure what I would do, but because I was expecting to play him in Louisiana, I had my opening ready. So let's jump right into the action. Now the game starts with the move d4. I play knight f6, and we get the move knight c3. Now, one important point is that when you play in tournaments, you should always be aware of what players are playing, especially these sort of lower-ranked opens, because a lot of players do not have games in the database. And so when I played in Louisiana, I saw that Matthew Pikus was playing this classic Jobava London in pretty much every single game. So I go g6. We get e3. Now I play the move c6 here. Worth pointing out, bishop g7 would be an inaccuracy because white can play knight to b5, attacking the pawn, and after knight a6 and knight c3, black either has to make a draw by repetition, which obviously I cannot allow in this situation, or black has to play a move like castles, for example, and after bishop takes a6, pawn takes, and the move bishop to e5, as you guys can see from the evaluation bar, white is a little bit better. So, I play c6 here, stopping knight to b5, and we get the move h4. Now, h3 is probably a little bit more precise in this position, but because I had seen some of my opponent's games in the Louisiana State Championship, I was expecting the move h4. So I played the move h5, stopping white from pushing p, and now we get the move knight f3. I play bishop g7, we get bishop e2, and now I play this move pawn to a5. Now, it was rather fortuitous that right before this game, I in fact very briefly looked at this line just to refresh myself, and I actually had this position on my computer mere minutes before I left to go to the playing site. So we get knight e5. I play knight bd7, we get f3, I take, and now I play the move b5. Now, before the game, the one line that I had looked at was the move queen to d2, and my intention was to play this move king to f8, a slightly awkward move, but it guards the bishop, and now if white plays a move like castles, you can go knight to d7, takes e4, and after the move bishop to a6, black is completely fine. Now, this is what I looked at mere minutes before the game, as I just mentioned, so I was feeling very comfortable in this situation, and now in this position, Matthew Pikus plays move a4. I go b4, we get knight to b1, and here at this moment in time, you might be thinking white is doing well because white can reroute the knight to b3, and maybe there's a c5 square, a5 could be a target, but there's a very concrete way for me to take advantage of this inaccuracy. So, I play the move bishop to h6, targeting the pawn on e3, and now we get the move king to f2. It's very telling that in this position, the best move according to the computer is knight to d2, gambiting the pawn on e3, and now after bishop d3 with moves like queen to e2, black is much better, but there is compensation for white. Now, would a human ever play like this? Not a chance in a million years, and so we get the very logical move king to f2, guarding the pawn. But now I castle my king, and white is way behind in development here. You have this rook, this queen, this knight, and this rook. All these pieces are on their original starting squares. The king on f2 isn't great either, because if white ever goes g4, after takes, and knight e4, the king is completely exposed, and white can't really play for e4 either, as black is covering this pawn as well. So with no pawn breaks here, lack in development, as you can tell from the valuation bar, white is already in a world of hurt. So we get the move knight e2. Now I play knight to d7 here, bishop has to go, and I play this move pawn to e5. Now, I was sort of expecting this move bishop to f4, but after bishop g7, it's still a very bad position for white because I'm still going to play e5 here. Let's say c4, e5, takes, and with the open diagonal, this weak king, a lot of pressure in the center, black is simply quite a bit better. So, after I play the move knight to d7 in this position, we now get the move bishop to g3, and here I lash out immediately with e5. Now we get the move rook to e1. White could try to take this pawn on e5, but after f6 here, black is just white is in all kinds of trouble. If white takes this pawn here, there's bishop takes e3, simply ending the game immediately, as black's going to have a quick checkmate here with queen to e3, and the king gets stuck. If white doesn't take the pawn, let's say white plays a move like e4, for example, after pawn takes pawn with queen b6 here, this king very much in the open and under attack here, and black controlling the center of the board. White is just paralyzed. You have the 3 heavy pieces stuck on their original squares here, and white can already resign. So that is why we got the move rook to e1. I play bishop g7, and now we get the move knight b3, trying to guard this pawn on d4. Now, white could always take, but once again, with the open diagonal here, this is just a miserable position, and white should lose this every time. So we get knight b3. Now I go bishop to f6, tickling the pawn on h4, and my opponent regrettably has to move the rook back to h1 to guard this pawn. Now I go rook to e8, we get queen d2, and here I play the move queen to e7. Now we get rook d1, and in this position I get a little bit sloppy or lazy, you could say, when I play this move bishop to b7 here. Probably if I wanted to go for this line, what I should have done here was play queen to e7, bishop b7, rook to d1, and now I'll move like rook to c8 with the idea of c5 rather than rook e8, simply because with the rook on e8 here, just to illustrate the point, if white can get this bishop to b5, there's a pin here. If I go c4, there's knight to c5 maybe, and white has some chances to confuse the situation. So back to the game. We get this position, I play bishop b7, we get c3, and now I trade. And here I play the very important move bishop to a6. Now what's very surprising to me, and I didn't actually realize this during the game, is that already here white still can probably resign in this position, even though there are going to be some trades and even material. The primary reason is that the rook and the bishop are glued guarding the pawn on h4, and black simply is going to fight for the open b file, and there are moves like queen to a3, so white just can't do a whole lot to survive. So we get queen d3, rook b6, rook b1, queen to a3, we get knight to d2, and now I play the move rook b8. Now, I did see the winning variation with pawn takes pawn and c5 here, simply creating a ton of threats in the center of the board, but I wasn't 100% sure that it was winning right away, and I decided why be careless here, just be solid, play the logical moves, create the double stack on the only open file, and all roads should lead to Rome. Or I should say to Iowa City. So we get rook a1. I go queen e7, rook to a2, rook to b2 here, creating the kebab on the second rank. We get takes, rook b1. And now after rook to a2, once again, white's position is falling apart. You have a weak pawn on a4, the knight is under pressure, pawn on h4 is also hanging, and white can simply resign. We get the move pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, takes, and here Matthew Pikus resigns the game because everything is under attack. The knight is under pressure, the queen and the bishop target this pawn is hanging, this pawn is hanging. White is going to lose all kinds of material, and there's just nothing to be done. Probably the only way to try and continue is king g1, but after takes, let's say knight to b3 and rook takes a4, black is up 2 pawns on the queen side, h4 is still hanging, and against a strong player, there's simply no hope of survival. So my opponent resigns here. I get a very, very smooth second round win, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself going into the third round. So in the third round, I'm playing with the white pieces against Dane Zagar, who has a USCF rating of 2100 and a FIDE of 1950. Now, it's always very tricky when you play 3 rounds in a day. When I played 3 rounds in Louisiana last week, in the third game, I played against this Colombian player, Vilumi, I believe was his name, or Vilami, I forget exactly what it was. I am obviously a little bit tired after this game. But in the third round, I did struggle, and it was a very tough battle. So I wasn't necessarily expecting a very easy or smooth game, but I actually played this game very much in that spirit. So I go d4. We get d5, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop e7, takes, bishop f4, and we get the move c6. I play e3, and now we get the move bishop to d6. Now this is a very dry position. It's something that I think actually makes a lot of sense for a lower rated player to play against a strong player, because in this position, I end up having to trade some pieces off the board very early. So I go queen c2. We get the move queen to f6 here. Black could also play a move like g6 with the idea of bishop to f5, or a move like b6 with the idea of bishop to a6. Both moves are completely playable. So we get queen to f6. Now I play knight to e2, we get bishop to f5, and I decide to castle. We get takes, queen g6, and now I play the move queen d2. My opponent goes a5, and now I play the move f3, trying to build this classic big white center, which is a very common occurrence in this Queen's Gambit declined exchange. Now, there are many variations where this happens. Another variation where this can occur is with knight f6. You get some position like this. White goes f3. You get castles, or I should say c6. You get bishop b3 castles. Knight ge2. Let's just say rook e8 castles. Knight b d7 here. Some position where eventually down the road, I'm just making some random moves here. White wants to play for f3 and e4 to build the big white center once again. So back to the game. We get this position here where I play f3, we get knight d7, and now I play e4, building the classic big white center. My opponent plays knight b6, and now I play the move b3, trying to stop knight c4. Now, there's nothing really wrong with the moves that I'm playing so far in the game, but the big issue here is that I am moving instantly as though this is bullet chess. As you can tell from the clocks here, I have 1 hour and 28 minutes, and my opponent has 59 minutes. Now, I should be thinking, but as I said before, even though I didn't necessarily have super long games to begin with, playing 3 games in a day takes a toll simply due to the amount of time you're awake and having to expend energy, even if the games aren't super challenging, just the sheer amount of time adds up. Now, the computer prefers queen to f4 here, which is a move that I briefly considered, but I go b3. We get castles, and now I play the move rook to e1, and this is simply a lazy move that, again, I play as though this is a game of bullet chess. Here, I should have played queen to f4 with this idea of queen to c7, targeting D's knights, and after a move like rook a c8, now I can play rook a e1, and white should be a little bit better. But no. I go rook to e1, and now we get the move rook d8. I have to admit, as soon as I played rook e1, I was kind of horrified because I saw that my opponent could trade the pawns on e4 and play this move f5. And even though white's probably a touch better after e5, black can put a knight on d5 here, and it's going to be extremely hard to win this game. But we get rook a d8. And I breathe a sigh of relief because my opponent has moved very quickly. Now, you would think after moving instantly here, I would start to slow down, realize the error of my ways, but no, I play rook d1 immediately. Now we get h5 here. Again, I think pawn takes pawn, followed by f5 is likely acceptable here, or maybe it's not acceptable now because of knight to f4, queen to f7, and d5, but you would think that I would take some time. But instead, I play rook d1 right away. Now we get h5, and here I play queen to f4 after a 7-minute think. Now, I had a feeling h5 was a weird move that creates some issues for black, because now the pawn's a target here potentially. I also have queen c7, so I do finally spend 7 minutes before playing queen f4, and as you can tell, I have a small advantage. So we get rook d7. Now I go queen to h4 with the ideas of both knight f4 and knight to g3 to win this pawn on the edge of the board. We get the move queen to h6, I go knight g3, and now my opponent plays the move knight to g6. Now at this point, I was feeling good about myself, but I still felt like the position was kind of imbalanced, but I wasn't sure if I was actually winning or even all that much better. So we get knight g6. Now I have to admit, I was sad to see this move because I was really hoping for g6 guarding the pawn on h5, because then after e5, I'm pushing all these pawns here, and black's position is going to collapse very quickly. So we get knight g6. I take the free pawn, we get the trade, takes, rook d8, and now I play knight e2. Here my opponent goes knight f8. Now, the funny thing is, you're looking at the position, or at least I was, and I'm thinking, well, I've got 6 pawns. I've got a big white center, I'm up a pawn, I should be doing very well. But as I started to realize very quickly, it's actually not that easy because it's very hard to push these pawns forward here, and it's going to require some really, really good technique. So I played the move rook to d2. Initially, I thought about going rook to d3, but I thought after knight to e6, if I play rook to d1, there's this trick with knight c5 here, and after a move like rook e3 and knight e6, I think black should be okay. Now, apparently after knight e6, rook g3, white's much better here. I don't really understand why after king to f8, because I thought I was going to lose this pawn, but apparently with rook f1, these rooks and the rook and the knights are perfectly placed here, and white is doing very well. But I missed that, or I rather miscalculated, so I put the rook on d2 instead, so that I can stack, and there's no knight c5 hitting the rook and the pawn. Now we get knight to g5, I go back, we get g6, and now I play the move knight c3. Here we get the move f6, and now I play h4, knight e6, and I play the move knight c to e2. Now after the move knight to c8, once again, I thought that I'm improving my position, I'm up a pawn here, I can push d5 or h5, I thought I should be close to winning. But I started spending a lot of time, and I think actually it's a good thing that I was using my time here because we're in an endgame where I need to be very precise, so I go h5. We get g5, and now I play this move d5. Now, I don't know if this move is necessarily bad per se, but after I played it, I was very unhappy with myself. I thought that I should probably just go knight to f5 right away here. And I'm not even sure why I didn't do this. I think maybe I was afraid of something like knight to g7, knight g3, takes, and knight d6 here, or something along these lines. But after takes and king to f2, white is simply up a pawn here and should be technically winning. So I go d5 here. Now we get pawn takes pawn, and here I take with the pawn on d5. We get knight c5, and now I go knight to f5, using this great bastion square for the knight to maybe push these wide pipos up the board. We get knight to e7, I trade, I go knight to g3, and now we get to move rook e5. Now, I'm actually really surprised to see the objective evaluation of this position, because when I reached this position in the game, I thought I was better since I'm up a pawn, but I actually did not think this was anything near winning. So here I played rook to f2, and I think this is the start of kind of going in the wrong direction. I probably should have played this move d6, simply pushing the p forward, but I thought after king f7, rook d5, and king to e6, takes, black should take with the pawn, but black is okay here. Apparently after king to f2, even though black can win this pawn on d6 with the outside passed pawn that I can push up the h-file, I should be winning. Now, it's very easy when you're looking at this with a computer to be like, okay, this wins, that wins, it's all very simple. But when you're tired and you've played a lot of chess in a day, it's not always that simple. So I should have played d6, but instead I go rook f2. We get rook to f8, and now I play rook to f1. And this move is not necessarily terrible either, but again, I should have played d6, and after knight to d7, played this move, rook to c1. I'm honestly not really sure why I didn't do this, to be honest. I'm confused. I guess I think I thought there was king f7 here, and after d7, rook d8, there's just rook d6, which is apparently winning. So I should have seen this. But again, it's a long day. I've been playing a lot of chess. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. So I play the move rook to f1. We get knight d7, and now I go knight to f5. And here my opponent plays king h7. Now I was progressively getting more and more frustrated because when you're playing someone much lower rate, you're expecting a blunder, you're expecting them to fall apart, and my opponent keeps fighting. Now, initially, my opponent went to reach for the rook and to play rook c8, but this move would actually, I believe, lead to a very clean win for me after knight h6, king g7, and the move knight to g4, because after takes, I thought this was actually winning clearly, but maybe after g4, black is still in the game. I don't really know, but I do think I would have won right away. So my opponent went to reach for the rook, and then he saw that it was a blunder and played king to h7, which stops the knight h6, knight g4 idea. So now I played the move rook to c2 very quickly, and this move is simply a bad move, which actually throws away the advantage. Now, initially I wanted to play d6, but after rook to c8, I started to panic because I saw here that black's rooks control the only open files on the board. Apparently after rook d1, rook to c5, and the move g4, white is winning. But after rook to e4 attacking the pawn, I was not really sure what was going on. Apparently rook to d4 is simply a win. But again, I'm tired. I feel like I've been playing badly throughout the game, kind of maybe lacking in confidence to some degree. So I play rook c2 here, going for the quick activity with the kebab on the 7th. We get rook takes pawn. I play rook c7, and now my opponent plays the excellent move rook to e8. Now, I initially saw b6 while I was calculating this line, and I thought after knight to e3 and rook d4, rook d1, this was winning. But as I realized while my opponent was thinking, before playing the move rook to e8, if we go forward back to this line, after rook to d1, takes, rook f7, knight c4, knight e5, takes, knight c4. I initially assumed this was winning by force, as I thought black would lose the juicers. But after f5, takes, and knight d6 here, knight c4, knight b7 guarding the pawn, knight e3, knight d6, and g4. I still thought there were a chance to win, but I wasn't sure if this was a win or a draw. Now, the computer says after takes and knight to e4, even though white is up a pawn on the queen side, with the active knight here, black should be able to save the game and make a draw. But instead we get rook e8. Now, I was really confused when this move was played because I was expecting b6. I was 100% sure it would be played. And then my opponent goes rook e8. And now I'm thinking to myself, what is even going on here? I'm not seeing anything. So I take the pawn, and now we get the move rook to e2. And this move is the fatal blunder here. If my opponent had played rook to e5, attacking the knight, now if I go g4, trying to protect the knight on f5, after rook to e4, now the pawn on g4 is going to fall since I have no way to guard it, and it's probably going to be a draw, so I can't go g4, and after knight to g3 and king to h6 here, after king h2 and f5, black is actually going to draw the game here because the best that I can do is trade everything down here, and after takes and rook to f2 here, I believe after a4 and rook to b2, rook to d3 here, King takes h5. Even though white has an extra pawn on the queen side, this should be a theoretical draw. But fortunately for me, my opponent plays the move rook to e2, and this is simply a blunder. It's a very understandable blunder here because it feels like you need to create a lot of activity, try to stack the two towers on the second rank, but this loses the game once and for all. Now, I was actually expecting rook to d2 potentially as well, but after rook to e2, I have a really neat idea where I can go rook to f3, and after rook to e2, I can play the move king to f1, and now black is a big problem, because if you were to say take the pawn, I can sack the rook with rook takes knight, and after takes, I have an extra horse, and I win the game. So we get rook to e2. Now I play knight to g3, a very important move to kick the rook away. My opponent plays move rook e6. If black were to take the pawn on a2, we get some really nice geometry here, because after knight to e4, I threaten this classic big fork of the knight, the king, and the rook here. Say black plays rook c2, for example. After takes, you cannot take back due to the pin, and you lose the game. If black were to play the move king to h6, trying to dodge these threats on the 7th rank, now I have knight back to c3, forking the two rooks once again and winning a bunch of material. So therefore we get rook to e6. Now I play the move king to h2, and here we get the move king h6. I play knight f5 back, and we get the move king h7. Black cannot take the juicer on h5, because knight g7 would fork the king and the rook. I take the rook, and I win the game. So we get king h7. Now I play the move rook to f3 here, and my opponent goes for this move g4. Now at this point, it's already pretty much lost here for black, because the best you can do is play something like rook to d2, but after the move rook to c3 here, lining up my own double stack on the 7th rank, after rook e2 and king to h3, black is just going to lose because rook c7 is incoming here. The king is stuck on this 7th rank where there's a big pin, and there's just not a whole lot to do. So we get the move g4. And now I play the move rook to e3, and here my opponent perhaps rather abruptly resigns because black just cannot keep the game going. If you trade the rooks and play rook takes h5 check, after king g3, the d5 square is covered by the horse, meaning that I'm going to win this knight, and I'm going to be ahead by a free horse. If my opponent plays the move rook to d3, I simply take the pawn, and now I'm up 2 pawns once again, and the pin is still in play here. And if black plays a move like rook to d4, I can simply go king g3, aiming to win this pawn. If black brings a king up, there's a fork once again. And if black goes rook d3, I just take with the 2 extra pawns. From a technical standpoint, there's no hope to survive. So, after the move rook to e3, my opponent, Dane Zagar, resigns this game, and with that, I end up winning all 3 of my classical games on day number 1 of the 70th Iowa State Open Championship. Now, this game was far from clear, and as I told my opponent after the game, he played a very, very good game. Yes, there were blunders, there were mistakes, but he found a lot of really good defensive resource at some critical moments, and this shows why you should never underestimate your opponents, because even though my opponent had a USCF rating of 2100 and a FIDE rating of 1950, he honestly played much closer to master level, or better in my opinion, and he put up a lot of resistance. Now, of course, you could say, well, I was tired as well, so that might have contributed, but nonetheless, you have to give credit where credit is due, and my opponent fought very, very valiantly in this game. Fortunately for me, I get the 3 wins. I moved to 3 out of 3. There are going to be 2 more games tomorrow, but this is another set of games chalked up in our road to the candidates. I believe that now I have 13 games remaining, so I'm feeling pretty good. I haven't done anything completely insane yet, but tomorrow will be the ultimate test in this tournament, as I'm likely to play against some of the top seeds who are master or better, so it should be a very exciting final 2 rounds of the Iowa State Open Championship. Now, obviously, I'm tired, so I apologize if I made some slips. It is close to 11 o'clock local time, so I'm going to go relax, probably go to bed pretty soon since I have a 9:30 a.m. game tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's 9:30, hopefully not 9, but I'll double check. So that's going to be it for right now. A very exhausting day. I take care of business, get the 3 wins, but tomorrow's a new day, and we'll see how it goes. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed my recaps today from the 3 games here on the Iowa State Championship. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with a recap after rounds number 4 and 5 and the conclusion of this great tournament here in Iowa City. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you very soon. Have a good one. Bye.